Good morning, brothers and sisters, fellow biblical scholars. Welcome to another Sunday edition of Faith Matters. This is going to be an interesting conversation. I just have that sense. You know how sometimes when you look at a passage, you go, oh, okay, that one, yeah, I think people are going to get that. That one will be fine. And yet other times you look at it and go, ooh, oh boy, I can't wait to hear what people say about this. That's what I have in mind for today's session. So I'm looking forward to hearing what you all think about it. I'm joined as always by my friend and colleague, Father Chris.
Morning.
And my lovely co-host, Jennifer, who is sitting on the end because she's going to be singing the anthem this morning, and so she has to sneak out halfway through the class so that she can rehearse to be able to be ready for y'all and sing beautifully. Did you find it? No, would you like to hand it to me and I'll find it?
I can do it if you want.
I don't know how to do it.
We're just, trying to get our technology catching up with us. You guys know how this is. You watch us all the time. You know what our challenges are. And might be, and then again might not be. We have decided that the best way to do this is we're a two iPhone, or at least I'm a two iPhone guy now, because that one's the one that's recording us, and then I borrowed Jennifer's so I can read your comments along here. So, good morning everybody. It looks like there's some folks on here, which is wonderful. For those of you who are new to Faith Matters, this is a guided exploration and conversation around today's gospel passage. So I will give you the gospel, and then I want to know what you guys think. You know, we talk a lot about the sermon is sort of a monologue. One of us talks and you guys all listen. Well, the class really, the aim is for it to be a dialogue. We want to hear what you think, and that might spark other conversations and other people's thoughts. And the way to do that is in the comment section. So feel free to write down your comments and let us know what you're thinking and what you're hearing. Okay. Good morning, Chris and Bill. All right, I think I've done enough vamping. It's time to dig in. Let me give you this morning's gospel passage from Matthew. Jesus withdrew in a boat to a deserted place by himself. But when the crowds heard it, they followed him on foot from the towns. When he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion for them and cured their sick. When it was evening, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a deserted place, and the hour is late. Send the crowds away so that they may go into the villages and buy food for themselves." Jesus said to them, "They need not go away. You give them something to eat." They replied, "We have nothing here but 5 loaves and 2 fish." And he said, "Bring them here to me." Then he ordered the crowds to sit down on the grass. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and blessed and broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the crowds. And all ate and were filled, and they took up what was left over of the broken pieces, 12 baskets full. And those who ate were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. I like having the organ in the background. I don't know if you can hear that, but Kathy's practicing, so it's kind of cool to have that in our background. So what did you hear? What might you have heard? This is a very familiar passage, right? The feeding of the 5,000, we know this one. Many of you probably could have done it off the top of your head with me. We know it so well. So I guess this morning what I want to ask you is, did you hear anything different? Did a detail just kind of pop for you that you may not have noticed before? Or did something in there just kind of rub you the wrong way? One of the issues we're having in this COVID world we're living in is that we're all kind of raw. And we're feeling things a little bit more intimately than we had in past times. Did anything from this passage sort of really get into sort of one of your open wounds, perhaps?
Rick, I'll jump in just because, as we know, it takes longer for people to type.
That's right.
And also, there's some chance that you and I maybe looked at the gospel passage earlier.
Could be. Could be.
The first sentence was absolutely brand new for me this week, this day, this COVID time. Mm-hmm. But not just COVID specific, but specific to the fact that you and Vince and I are doing so much electronic ministry. And as we both discussed, we're spending way more time on Facebook and social media than we normally do. Mm-hmm. And
or care to.
Yeah. Or care to. And a part of that is I'm seeing an interest from many, many, many people, more than ever. There's a desire to be an influencer, to be, and that the word for someone who has a lot of followers, whether it's on Insta, or you have followers on Twitter, or you have viewings on Facebook. And you and I use that as a metric, and I think reasonably so.
We do.
Did our message work or not? Right. But of course, we know that the goal is to be purveyors of the gospel and not Mr. Popularity. But you can get bogged down and go, oh, that message must have really worked. Yeah, I really nailed it that day. But exactly. But I'm instructed by the first line of Jesus, who withdrew in a boat to a deserted place by himself. And let me just say it all at once. I saw a TED Talk recently where an actor beautifully said, the difference between seeking attention and wanting attention versus paying attention. Mm. And our Lord and Savior went to a deserted place by himself to collect himself, to pray to his Heavenly Father, and he didn't need people around. His primary motive is not to be popular, famous, or desired. His motive is to be the goodness of God incarnate, and that requires paying attention rather than seeking attention.
Mm-hmm. Amen. I like that.
And I saw a woman yesterday, and she has stories pop up every single day on Facebook. She's always totally made up. She sort of has an Eastern European accent, and I just see this desire to want to be the next Oprah, but there's just not enough there that I can see her viewerships. She's trying so hard, I actually pray for her. But I sense it's a seeking of attention rather than a paying of attention.
Yeah.
But lest I sound judgmental about her, I need to remind myself to take that time in solitude as Jesus models here. And when we do that, that's when fish and loaves are more likely to be multiplied.
Agreed. Well, our time is up for the day, folks.
Let's see what others have to say.
Oh, maybe some other people want to speak too. Yeah. Yes, somebody's pointing out that the feeding was in a deserted place. Mm-hmm. I like that. Yes. It was a place set away from everything else. And yet, even though they were in the desert, they weren't in a desert area, because he says, and I've lost it. He makes the crowd sit down on the grass. Yeah. Where's their grass? Right along the Sea of Galilee. Mm-hmm. That's an interesting detail. Kelly says, well, Jesus is more than capable of pulling this off. It's also possible the real miracle was the hearts of people opening where they weren't fearful. Yeah. I like that. Mm-hmm.
I'm always wondering where the disciples were when Jesus was by himself. Like, were they also in a deserted place praying, or were they just out and about with the crowd? Because their reaction to the crowd is a lot different than Jesus. Like, they want to send people away, whereas Jesus is like, nope, don't send them away. I'm going to give them something to eat. So he was in a better place maybe because he had gotten away by himself than the disciples were, whatever the heck they were doing while he was off by himself. Mm. That's what I see in there. I don't know.
No, that's a really good point. one would have to sort of intuit from what the text says and doesn't say, frankly, that the disciples were with the crowd, not with Jesus, because it says quite clearly, Jesus withdrew in a boat to a deserted place by himself. Usually, if the apostles were with him, it would have said Jesus and the disciples withdrew to a deserted place. It doesn't. It goes to great lengths to say he was by himself. So the disciples probably were just as anxious as the crowds to say, oh, there goes Jesus, let's go get him. Rosalie says, these were peasants who would not go away from home without food. And so when Jesus called the apostles to feed them, everyone shared what they had. Jesus blessed what they had and increased it to feed everyone. Yes, that is true, but in a lot of this, not necessarily in Matthew, but in Mark, we hear that the genesis of the origination of the loaves and the fishes were from a small boy who that was probably his lunch. And so when we're talking about loaves, we're not talking about big giant loaves of Italian bread or French bread. No, we're talking about little tiny sort of barley cakes that were cooked on a hot stone. You know, like not even as big as sort of like street taco size pieces of bread. And these fish, these weren't like huge giant king salmon. They were probably small little fish that had been caught right there locally at the Sea of Galilee. So this is not abundance in any way, shape, or form. And yet, from that little meager amount, Jesus is able to make it not just enough, to make it more than enough, to make it abundance. So abundant that they took up 12 baskets full of the leftovers from those little teeny tiny 5 pieces of bread.
Yeah, this one doesn't tell where the 5 loaves and fish come from, right?
This one does not tell. Yeah, that detail is in Mark, not in Matthew.
Even so, I mean, it could have been like 5 people giving up their lunch.
It could have been. It could have been. Because this is one of 2 mass feeding stories in the gospel. There's another one where it's also several thousand people. And in our own sort of, because we know the Bible and we tend to conflate all 4 gospels together, we think we know this story, but in reality, sometimes it's a little bit different. So that's why we try to focus on the text. Cindy reminds us that Jesus needed to be alone, and even then, when he was called upon for help and guidance, he was there. He gave up his time alone to care for the people. Judy says, it's climate change. 2,000 years ago, there was grass. I don't want to disagree with you, but that's not the way the Holy Land looked back then either. But there were certain parts of it, and they clearly found one.
Well, if there was a boat, there had to be water in that particular spot.
Right.
So that's where the grass grew, because there was water there.
Yeah.
You are talkative, my lunchable. What does that mean? Sure strikes me as clever.
My lunchable?
What?
Her lunchable is
Lunchable is those snacks that you give kids.
Lunch.
You can buy little
pre-made lunch
lunches.
Yes.
Right. Chris and Bill wonder if Jesus was told ahead of time this was going to happen.
Huh?
Let me just state categorically, I was not there. But from looking at the text, I would say no. Because if Jesus knew this was going to happen, it's very likely he would not have tried to go off on a boat by himself. Usually when Jesus was trying to get away, it was so that he could take some time and recharge. I mean, it can be exhausting doing what Jesus does, doing the ministry. I don't know about you, Father, what your experience is, but I will tell you that back in the old world, pre-COVID, 25 years ago, Sunday mornings were the most unbelievably life-giving, yet also draining experiences in my week. And what I mean by that is it's such a privilege to get to do what we get to do, and we give a lot, we hear a lot, we're fed by, and we also feed God's people. But at the same time, it takes a lot of energy to do that. And by Sunday afternoon, I have become a big devotee of the post-liturgical nap, which is just a way to sort of kind of recharge my batteries. And, you know, I'm just a little old priest in little old Las Vegas. Jesus had, you know, multiple million times that. So I certainly can understand the motivation for Jesus to want to just get away for a little bit by himself, take that deep breath and kind of regather himself and restore his energy.
I don't know. I think, well, he was talking to God, right, all the time when he was away. He was conversing with his Father. So I think maybe he said, hey, there's a bunch of people down there. Go down and feed them. You know what I mean? Like, I think he probably knew that there was a lot of people down there, and he knew they needed to be fed. So God's like, all right, your time with me is done. Why don't you go down and feed these people because they need you now? That's what I would think if he was chatting with God while he was having alone time.
I think that's exactly right. And that if you're constantly seeking God's guidance, I had just this morning a request. I was really right in the middle, deeply in thought, doing something, and someone walking the labyrinth said, can I have communion? And I thought, now what is the right answer? Because I thought, you know, if 250 people see the live stream that I'm going to record not long from now that still needs polishing, but it's literally like the second I had thought, I thought, well, God will guide me. And right that second I thought, I'm getting up, I'm going to have communion.
Yeah.
I can say with Cindy Berg, and we went into the sanctuary, whatever that was, an hour ago, and for both of us, that was a holy 10 minutes. And the right thing to do was what we did. So thank you, Cindy, for that blessing. But as we're discussing about Jesus, we need both, and only God can direct us as to which is what and when.
That's right. That's right. And you made the right call.
Yeah?
Right.
And I'm sure the live stream will be great, because they always are.
It might be about the very communion we just did.
See, and honestly, that's what happens. Sometimes we're getting ready to do we're doing like 7-day-a-week preaching now at Epiphany, and that can be a struggle. I'll be quite candid with you. But sometimes the inspiration comes from the strangest places, and oftentimes I find it's from those pauses, those divergences that we really weren't planning on taking, and when we do it, we go, oh, look, there's that. Letting the Holy Spirit flow through one's body is taxing. Yeah, amen, Kim. Chatting with God. That's kind of what prayer is, Joyce. I know you all know this already, but at the risk of just maybe there's one person out there, not every prayer has to be scripted. It has to be something out of the Book of Common Prayer. It has to be something that you learned at, you know, your grandmother's knee. Prayer can be just a conversation with God. It can be as simple as saying, God, I don't even know what to say. Just be with me. That's prayer. And prayer can be so powerful. So there's another detail in here that struck me, and I wonder if it struck anybody else. Jesus says to them, bring the loaves and the fish to me, and he orders the crowd to sit on the grass. He takes the loaves, looks up to heaven, blesses and breaks them, but he doesn't feed the people. He gives them to the disciples, and the disciples then give them to the crowd. I think that's interesting. I think there might be something to that, and I'm curious what my fellow biblical scholars on that side of the camera might think about that detail. Sorry, I do a tremendous amount of talking. As much as I tease Father Chris about talking, I do more talking than he does.
You're the MC.
I'm trying to catch up with your comments. Rachel wants to know what they had to drink with the loaves and the fishes. Might have been a nice Chardonnay, kind of, you know, little oaky.
Judy Watts guesses grape Kool-Aid.
No. There's no Kool-Aid. We're not a cult. We don't do Kool-Aid.
Especially grape. Oh, can you imagine? Can you imagine how organic and great that bread was back then?
Ooh.
With the laws of what is that, husbandry, that were part of the Jewish code.
That's right.
How delicious. I'm getting goosebumps thinking how good that bread must be and how horrible grape Kool-Aid would taste with it.
Well, except that it came from a little boy, so as much as his mother might have made those with love and with clean hands, I don't want to eat anything a 7-year-old boy has been hauling around, because I raised 3 7-year-old boys. I know how disgusting they can be. Kelly makes a really good point. Jesus, as talking about giving the bread to the disciples to distribute, she says, Jesus has no hands on earth but our hands. Thank you, Kelly, and thank you, Teresa of Avila, because that's where that comes from. Yeah, it really was a good way to model that. So it wasn't like, Jesus stood up there to give the bread to all those people. No, Jesus let that go out into the world. It's funny, I think about that sometimes. So back in the day when we used to have Mass here at the church, and when the bishop would come, it would always be interesting to me, because we'd have 2 lines for people to come up and get to the rail, and typically, the bishop would take one side, because bishops are also priests, my friends, and Father Chris or I would have the other side, and I would see people who would, once they realized who was who, they would change lines so they could get communion directly from the hand of the bishop. Like that was a super special thing, and in some ways I guess it kind of is, but Jesus knew instinctively that that wasn't what he was called to do in this case, so he gave the bread to the disciples, who then gave it to the people, and Jesus kind of, in my mind anyway, Jesus kind of just stood back and watched the whole thing, and I think there's real beauty in that.
Well, we've talked before, Rick, about how the best leaders are never ego-driven.
That's
and
right.
They don't want their movement or their message to be connected to personality.
Yeah.
So that we know that Joel Osteen's father succeeded in that. When he stepped out, the ministry continued to bloom and grow with Joel. Robert Schuller of the Crystal Cathedral did not think what would follow. Yeah.
Right.
But do we agree that in terms of absolute mastery of this was Jesus?
Oh, amen.
From word go to word end, sending out the 12, sending out the 70. Even as you noticed in this, he's on it always.
Exactly. Agreed. Jesus was teaching the apostles that they could feed the world. Yeah.
Amen.
Jesus never missed an opportunity to teach. Ever, ever, ever. Heather says, the thing to keep in mind is that sometimes people take the Bible too literally. He may have fed upwards of 15 or 20,000 people and needed the help of the disciples to pass it out. Oh, clearly. I mean, I've given communion at a large church service. It can take a long time, and that's, 400 or 500 people. 5,000, if it was just Jesus, that would have taken a long time.
I was invited to do a healing service in Augusta, Georgia once for a woman who was so beloved and had cancer. Mm-hmm. And they thought maybe 100 people would show up, and it was standing room only, probably in the 400 to 500 range. Right. And I deputized on the spot. I said, anybody who's ever felt the slightest call to laying on of hands. And it was just one big prayer fest and laying on of hands for about half an hour. And hundreds of people received the prayers all before we went to lay hands upon the woman for whom the service. And yes, 15 years later, there are the goosebumps.
Still goosebumps, yeah.
But speaking of numbers, since Heather brought it up, she's right. We have to deputize them.
I had the great good fortune to attend the part of the Episcopal Church's General Convention in Austin a couple of years ago. And I was only there for a very short period of time, but I did get to go to one of the Eucharist celebrations, and there were probably 4,000 or 5,000 people in the hall for this service. And I'd never been in an Episcopal service that was that large. It It was a really cool experience to be there. And I was a fly on the wall. I was literally standing at the very back because I had to sneak out after, and it was a thing. But my point is, being there and being part of that, and then receiving communion with thousands of other people, and they must have had 30 communion stations where they were administering the bread and the wine. And even then, it took a long, long time. But what a powerful experience to just be in that line waiting, and then seeing the people up in the front receiving and consuming and crossing and then moving on, and the next, it was very, very powerful. So, and it kind of put me in mind of this particular passage, what that must have been like. I laugh at myself because what I see on the camera is probably about 10 seconds ahead of what you guys see. And so I have an opportunity to look down and realize just how much I talk with my hands. My apologies.
What, is that a problem?
Oh, goodness. Okay, folks, we've got about 2 minutes left. Anybody have any final comments that they want to share on this particular passage? While we wait for your final comments, let me just insert one more quick commercial. If you haven't already heard about it, we are going to begin a class this coming Tuesday evening called Embracing Evangelism. We're going to do it through Zoom, so you do need to register for this class. The reason we're doing it via Zoom as opposed to the way we're doing this is so that we can see and hear one another, and actually have group conversations and then break into small groups. Zoom has a way of doing that. So we'll watch a video presentation, we'll have large conversation, and we'll have small group conversation. It's going to be a 6-week program. It's a program that is put together by the National Church and Virginia Theological Seminary, and it's a good program. I think you will enjoy it. If you want to register, today is the last day. You just need to send an email to me, rector@nvepiphany.org. That's all. I got about 25 people signed up right now, so there's definitely room for more. And somebody asked me, well, do I have to be a member of your congregation? Let me just say 2 things about that. The first is no, anyone can take this class. And the second is, if you're taking the time to be on this Faith Matters feed or be watching our services, you are in fact a member of our congregation. So there ends the commercial. Oh, Heather has gone to see Joel. I know that makes Chris's heart beat faster because he makes a pilgrimage on occasion too.
I not only like Joel, I like Houston. And you either get it or you don't.
That's true. Yes, Kelly, too much time in the North End, although there's no such thing as too much time in the North End, except my belly would get too big. When will you send us the meeting ID? Rosalie, I did send the meeting ID, so if you haven't received it, look in your spam folder, because it has already gone out. But I will send it to you again this afternoon, just to be sure. Okay, my friends, we are approaching that time.
Nobody likes Houston. And on that note, Carol Wagers.
Wow. Thank you, Carol. I assume you mean the Astros, because I'm a Red Sox fan, so that must be that.
I am that nobody.
All right, brothers and sisters, thank you for joining us for this great conversation. As usual, you took us places I never imagined we'd go, and that's the real fun of this. May God bless you, and I look forward to seeing you at our worship service at 10 o'clock this morning. Bye-bye.